Good evening, everyone. Late Night Mega here, and tonight we're playing a very unique and unusual deck. This is what I call a black-red sort of aggro control discard type of deck. Now, the way this deck came about was way back in like 2009 or 2010 or something. I had a legacy mono-black sort of budgety deck, but it was based on using using discard effects like Inquisition of Kozilek or Duress and Hymn to Torok to make your opponent discard a bunch of cards, and then playing something like a well, Gurmag Angler didn't exist, but the big flying demon dude that had Delve, the original Delve demon. I can't think of his name right now. Grave Tombstalker. Tombstalker, that's his name. Yes, Tombstalker. That guy. So using him and as kind of a big finisher, because you'll fill up your graveyard quite quickly playing all these spells. You have like Sign in Bloods, you have black discard, and you also had Gatekeeper of Malakir and Vampire Nighthawk in the deck. And the deck also ran, I believe I was playing 3 to 4 Nantuko Shade, which I really enjoyed that card, but it does get a bit mana intensive if you want to do anything meaningful with it and have it survive combat. So I was playing that deck, and I wanted to bring that idea to Modern. I wanted to bring that mono black aggro control style deck to Modern. The deck ran 15 creatures, 22 spells, and 23 lands, so you can see I kind of kept that ratio the same. Now in Modern, though, I was looking at the black removal, and I'm like, it's kind of iffy. I mean, yeah, there's Disfigures I could run. I think I ran Disfigures as well in the Legacy build. But, yeah, and some of those other cards were not Modern legal, the Hymn to Torok and the Dark Ritual, so obviously I couldn't do that in Modern. So then I got the idea, well, why don't I just splash red into the deck? That gives me access to Terminate and Lightning Bolt as better removal. Bolts give me a little bit of reach as well, and I can also play 4 copies of Kolaghan's Command, since, we don't have Hymn to Torok. This was kind of the replacement for it. It's a great 2-for-1. So, great card. And, I kept most of the creatures the same, although I wasn't playing the other, there was another Spectre, Hypnotic Spectre. I'd also do a turn 1 Dark Ritual into Hypnotic Spectre in that deck. And if you don't answer that, that is very not good for your opponent. But if he does have an answer, if he has a Lightning Bolt or something, it was a very bad time for you. And so that's where this Slavering Nulls kind of came in. Originally this was like this was Young Pyromancer. You could put Young Pyromancer here. This slot is meant for a 2-mana creature. Young Pyromancer does the job just fine. I tried him out. I tried a 2-2 split between the Nulls and the Pyromancer, and ultimately I've decided to go with 4 Slavering Nulls, because no one is going to know what this card does when you play it against them, and they're going to look at you really weird when you drop it on turn 2. And so this deck does have some weird cards, and then it would finish with a couple of these Delve creatures. If you want the Tombstalkers for flying, you can do that, but I also run Desecration Demon. Hugely underrated card in my opinion. 4 mana and you get a 6/6 flyer with something that I don't really consider a drawback. If my opponent's going to be sacrificing their creatures and essentially giving me card advantage, I'm on board with that. That's awesome. So I like it. Gatekeepers, and these guys also have synergy with the Kolaghan's Command, the option to return creatures back, so I did want to have some main deck Gatekeepers, although I couldn't quite fit 4 of them in. And then we have, the Inquisition, Lightning Bolt, Sign in Bloods, Terminates. And then I had 2 more slots for the spells, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. let's just throw Slaughter Games in the main deck. I've gotten some experience with Modern, and whether it's combo or control or whatever you're playing against, you can probably name a card that you just don't really want to deal with anymore. And, you know, Slaughter Games just takes care of that for you. And no one sees that coming, especially in Game 1. And the mana base, it is super easy to splash for a second color. You know, my mana base for the old Legacy deck was like just 23 swamps. So clearly we could do a little bit more. I have the capability of doing a little bit more, so I have some fetch lands. I've got 6 fetches because those go great with the Gurmag Anglers. And we have these black-red cards. Only one basic mountain, so there's only one card in this deck that does not produce black mana. You do have a lot of black sources, or a lot of black requirements. Double black for Sign in Blood, technically triple black for Gatekeeper, because you're always going to want to play it with the kicker cost, unless you know your opponent's playing a deck with no creatures. Vampire Nighthawk is also quite a workhorse. The Flying Death Touch lifelink, yeah, it dies to Lightning Bolt, but you know, if your opponent is throwing lightning bolts at it, you know, you can 2-for-1 them with Kolaghan's Command and get your Nighthawk back. Lifelink helps you regain life that you lost from Sign in Blood and your fetch lands and so on. So that's really nice as well, and it trades with basically every creature. So back to the mana base, 2 Bojuka Bog in the main deck, just as a way to mass exile the graveyard. That can always be nice. And 1 Temple of Malice. Those are the only things that come into play tapped. And unless your opening hand has both your Bogs and your Temple as your only mana sources, you should be okay as far as playing your cards on time. And 1 Urborg because, well, why not? It's a bit of an upgrade. It allows your fetch lands to tap for black mana instead of paying a life if you don't want to do that, which you might not want to as the game goes on. So sideboard. For the sideboard, I'm like, well, this deck is obviously weak to enchantments, and there's not really anything that I can do about it. So if I can't be anti-enchantment, I may as well be anti-artifact. So I throw in Rakdos, a couple Rakdos terms, and that gives us another graveyard, mass graveyard exile at instant speed, so your opponent might not see that one coming. And also, Splinter Twin was still a card that was legal in Modern at the time, so the third option is kind of there, can be used to deal with that as well. Shattering Blow, exile artifacts, because, you know, I build decks with Tron in mind, and Tron decks play Wormcoil Engine, which, if you just destroy the Wormcoil Engine, they get 2 3/3 creatures. So I'm like, well, let's throw those in there. The Electricaries, I believe those can be out of the deck now. I have notes here saying that I need to update this deck for Crumble to Dust, because I played this deck before I had Crumble to Dust, or before Crumble to Dust was a card, I should say. And I know I'm trying to go in order with the series on the order that I built these decks, and I vaguely remember playing my Cruel Ultimatum deck without Crumble to Dust, so I think this was sometime in between there. There were a couple times where I did take breaks from the Cruel Ultimatum deck and to do something else like this. So a few of these might be a little bit foggy, might be a little bit out of order, but that'll be okay. Things will pan out as we go a little bit further in this series and get up to current times. Right now we're still around the end of summer, early fall of 2015. And I'm like, well, what can I do about Planeswalkers? Well, I could play Dreadbores. I could put Dreadbores in here, or I could just put in 3 Phyrexian Revokers. Those have more synergy with the Kolaghan's commands, and they do a little bit more than just dealing with planeswalkers. It can be activated abilities, if anything. And so if I was going to... Oh, and I have 4 Wretch Mines in here. They're in the sideboard. You know, they're kind of the replacement for Hymn to Torok. They're one of the things that brought me to this deck as well. But I just don't believe they're good enough to be in the main deck when you have heavy artifact decks running around Modern like Affinity, Lantern Control, and even Tron. So the Wretch Mines are kind of in the sideboard, and you can sideboard them in against anything that's not running artifacts. So there's that, and one Chandra the Firebrand, which this is kind of just a fun of, like, I needed a 15th card, and I'm like, I don't know what to put in here. Let's put in Chandra. It does some interesting things, that's for sure, like letting you copy a Kolaghan's Commander, copying a Slaughter Games, and that can be really, really amusing. And, you know, a lot of decks do have a hard time just dealing with planeswalkers, and sometimes pinging off 1 toughness creatures. That's another thing that the Chandra can do. So, yeah, I threw that in there. Had some good times with her as well. You will get a lot of weird looks playing some of these cards. Oh, so overall, this deck is not super competitive. It is fun. Its strengths are against any sort of artifact deck. Fun story. First time I played this deck, I ended up getting matched up against Lantern Control and Affinity in the same tournament. It was like 3 or 4 rounds on a Tuesday night. And yeah, the Lantern Control player, he jumped a bit when he played he had his Lantern of Insight out, and then the top card revealed to be Slaughter Games. He kind of freaked out about that idea. Of course, I didn't get to draw it, but it's still a very amusing time nonetheless. And against Affinity, you know, you've got so much artifact removal. You've got 4 Kolaghan's Commands. You've got Rakdos Charms, Shattering Blows that you can bring in from the side. Also against Affinity, you can bring in the Chandra. You can bring in the Phyrexian Revokers and start naming Cranial Plating and Arcbound Ravager and stuff, and just make their life miserable. I was amused by it. This deck is also pretty good against other creature-based decks. Deck's weaknesses: any sort of blue-based, heavy, dedicated control deck. They're just going to have counter spells, they're going to have a better late game than you, and yeah, there's not much you can do about counter spells in this deck. They go to counter something, it is countered, except for Slaughter Games, but yeah. Desecration Demon and Gurmag Angler, these guys can finish games pretty darn quickly, which is why they're kind of the chosen spots for these creatures. You could also run Phyrexian Obliterators. I did not have any Obliterators at the time, and right now I only own 1, so... but yeah, Phyrexian Obliterator, that is another valid option in this spot here for Desecration Demon. So if you have them, you could run those as well, because those are a hoot. And like I said, you only have 1 land in this deck that cannot produce the black mana, and even that can if you have the Urborg out. To update this deck with Crumble to Dust, because you're still going to want that against Tron, I'd probably take out the Electricaries and maybe a Shattering Blow, or maybe a Rakdos Charm, because Splinter Twin is banned, so each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. Not quite as good anymore as it used to be. And that gives you spots for 3 crumbles. And I'm sure there's probably other things you could do with this deck or with this template, but I had a good time with it. It was a neat little fun deck. Other fun stories. I took this to... I did take this to a Friday Night Magic. This was the first deck I took to the Friday Night Modern event, which has some players that don't really show up on Tuesdays. They just come to Friday nights and play Modern. And so it was quite a different metagame. There were definitely more control decks. I ran into Grixis control and this deck just got slaughtered by it. Ran into a Bluetron deck and this deck just utterly slaughtered that, especially the Slavering Nulls here. You resolve a Slavering Nulls against a Bluetron deck, and if they don't have a way to stop it from damaging them, they're going to lose very quickly. They're going to lose just so much card advantage with all the discard. And I remember Bluetron, like, I played this turn 2. Turn 3 he goes, okay, I play Treasure Mage. Taps out to play Treasure Mage, so he has a blocker, right? I go, okay, my turn, I play Kolaghan's Command. 2 damage to your Treasure Mage, have you discard a card, attack you with the Slavering Nulls, discard another card. I had a good time, he did not. So, yeah, lots of amusing things tend to happen when I play Modern. And I really enjoy the format, and I enjoy things like this. So, fun little deck. This is currently the only non-blue deck in my, well, you could say my Modern arsenal of decks. So far, as of the point of this recording, I probably have like 5 or 6 more, maybe 7 decks. Maybe not even that many to talk about still on here. So this is, we're approaching the end of, well, this video, and I always like to end with a teaser for the next deck. Maybe something that, maybe I could name some sort of card. With this next deck is so far out there. This is the first, this will be the first deck. You think this deck looks weird. Wait till you see the next one. It's the first time that I really stepped outside the box in Modern, really built a deck from scratch. No templates, no porting decks from another format, no porting one of my old decks. Well, although I was kind of porting a standard deck into Modern, but we'll get into that next time. And I've been trying to think of some sort of teaser to leave you guys, and there's just so many good ones. I could name, like, one of the 10 different cards in the deck, and that would be good enough. I could tell you what I call the name of the deck, and that would be a good enough teaser. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you 2 of the cards in the deck. One of them is Path to Exile, well, that's pretty normal, and the other is Mana Tithe, which those 2 cards are kind of at odds with each other. But I promise you, this wacky deck, it somehow works. It has synergy with each other, even the Mana Tithe and Path to Exile. So, I'll see you guys next time for that. And this is Late Night Mega. Good night, everyone.